Story number 1. This is a reoccurring dream of mine that I believe many others have as well. It all started when I was younger and I was in my dream. I was in my room, in my bed, and my dream seemed very normal. I wasn't sure what I was doing in there, but I couldn't do too much about it. A minute or so into my dream and I get out of my bed to go get out of my room. The door was locked from the outside. Now this is impossible because my room didn't have a lock, so it was either being held or it was sealed from the other side. Now another problem is that my room is very small and there isn't much space from my bed to my door. I went back to my bed to see a hand emerge from the wall. I quickly jolted up, and to my shock I saw hundreds of hands soon follow up from all over the place. Now at the end of my bed, I'm terrified, and I notice hands coming from the door, from the floor, and now even from my bed. I soon get grabbed, and I can't move. I woke up soon after that, and I'm still frightened by that dream I had. I was wondering if anyone else had an experience like that and would be able to explain why it's reoccurring, or even their own experience of this dream. Story number 2. When I was younger, between 3 and 11 years old, I lived in a trailer with my stepdad, my mom, and my younger brother. We lived in a very small town in northern Minnesota. The town had less than 100 people. The center of the town was about a mile away, and down the street from that was 6 or 7 houses, and I lived in the middle one. On the left of our trailer was the front door, our playground, a strip of border trees, and a crop field, corn to be specific. On the right of our trailer was the back door. Its door handle was broken and we didn't have money to fix it, which led into a fenced-in area for our dogs, and then another border strip of trees. A daycare on the other side, and less than half a mile down the road was a cemetery. To the front of our house was the road and a cornfield, and to the back of our house was our backyard, which was bordered by tall, thick weeds and an empty field that had a trail that led from our house to the woods, which was a little less than half a mile from our house. We were very poor at the time, which is why we couldn't fix a lot of things in our house, even if we needed them, like the door in the back. The layout of the trailer went like this. Towards the road and the front end was my room, which was the furthest from everyone. A small bathroom and a hallway. The front door, living room, kitchen, dining room, and then a long hallway towards the back. On the left side of the hallway, more towards the back of the kitchen, was my brother's room, and right across from that was the back door. And then in the very back was my parents' bedroom. My stepdad was pretty abusive to me, so in the middle of the night I would run away, which was more or less just sneaking out and hiding under our front porch for maybe an hour or two and then sneaking back into my room. At one point when I had done it, my stepdad got so mad he broke our porch light, and I was 7 or 8 at the time. One night was particularly bad, so I left at like midnight or 1 a.m. and went under the porch. I was there maybe 30 minutes, and then I tried to get back inside. Little did I know that my stepdad was still pissed off and locked me out. At this point, I was 9 years old, so I freaked out. I started crying at the door, trying to get it open. All the lights were off inside, so it was almost pitch black outside aside from the street light. I was still crying when I heard the sound coming from the woods. It sounded like crying, so I stopped, thinking it was echoing or something, but it never stopped. The crying didn't sound like an animal or anything. It sounded like someone had recorded a person crying. It really sounded like me. I panicked, fear tearing through me. I tried the door harder, but I couldn't get the door open. I'll just run to my mom's window, I thought. As I was about to, the crying sounded closer than it had before. It was a continuous crying, but it was also coming towards me. My face began to heat up and tears lined my vision. Back door. The words popped into my head. The doorknob is broken. I can get in. I paused and listened to the crying. It still sounded closer to the woods than me, so I took my chance. I ran around the front of the house and paused before I reached the right side. The crying had stopped. This was my chance. It had gone away, or so I thought. I booked it to the fence. The latch was stuck. I tried to push it up, and just as it started to slide up, there was a whisper from the tall border weeds, no more than 15 feet away from where I was facing. "Come here. Come here. Come here." The words became stretched out and honestly horrifying. It sounded like a very old, slow, distorted sound from a handheld recorder. I pushed the fence gate open and slammed the latch back down, ran up our decaying steps, all 2 of them, and flung open the door. I slammed it shut and pushed a heavy box in front of it. I booked it down the hallway, through the living room, and right into my room. I closed my window quietly and let the blanket fall over it so nothing could see in. I turned off all the lights and turned on a movie very softly and crawled into the top bunk and waited out the night. I could hear walking around the trailer, and I could hear muffled whispers. "Come here." And then crying. "Go away. Go away. Go away." I wanted to scream at it, but I didn't want it to find me. The morning came, and I told my mom about my stepdad locking me out, but not about what had happened. "Who the hell do you think you are? She's mine." My mom screamed at him. He apologized and said he thought I was inside. I knew he was lying because I did this every night, and he always saw me. My mom didn't know, however, and I never snuck out after that. The next night around 10 p.m., I was sitting in my bed and I could hear coyotes towards the cemetery. I fell asleep for a while and got up later in the night, around the same time as the previous night, and went to get some water from the kitchen. My stepdad was waiting for me. "Come outside. I want to talk to you." In my situation, I was mortified. I was about to be outside with that thing and my horrid stepdad. We went out to the front porch and I was just waiting for that degrading to start, but it never did. We stood out there for about 10 minutes in silence, watching the stars in the sky. Off in the distance, we could hear what sounded like coyotes from before, but this time it was in the field behind our house. They sounded weird now. "That's coyotes. They're hunting something," my stepdad said. I looked up at him and I shook my head. "It doesn't sound like coyotes. It sounds weird." He gave me a knowing look and then sat down on the bench next to where I stood. I looked out towards the field. The coyotes sounded even closer. I looked back at my stepdad, and he seemed like he was hesitant to tell me something. I looked back at the field again. The noises were so close this time, and I swear I could hear hoofs in the weeds. Goosebumps grew on my skin as I noticed them. A pair of red eyes staring at me exactly in the weeds where I could hear the coyotes and the hoofs. I stepped back and gasped. My stepdad looked and then put a firm hand on my shoulder and pushed me towards the front door. He got me back inside and locked the door and the chain above it. He brought me into the kitchen and said, "Don't leave the house at night. It's dangerous out there." What was in the weeds? What animal has red eyes? I started quietly crying and told him about the previous night. He pulled me in and hugged me. "You're not old enough to know right now. Just promise me you won't go out at night again." I just cried and nodded. He brought me to my brother's room and set up a sleeping bag on the floor next to my brother's bed and our dogs. They were on alert and growling at the blanketed window. He put on a movie for us even though my brother was sleeping, and went back to the living room where he stayed the rest of the night. All throughout the night I could hear the cries of coyotes and some form of growling from my dogs or the coyotes. My stepdad never talked about that night, never told me what it was, so I can't know for sure what I saw or heard, but I think it was a Wendigo or a skinwalker. I listened and I never went out at night again. Story number 3. I have a scary story that I want to share, and it's 100% true, but a bit long. So my friend and her husband bought a 1920s arts and crafts style cottage and spent a year or so fixing it up and did a pretty damn good job. The house was beautiful, immaculate, and still cozy and homey. She asked me if I'd be willing to house and pet sit for a few weeks, and I agreed, looking forward to pretending the house was mine for a little while. She took me on a walk through, and I noticed the attic door was locked, and there were several boxes of books piled up against it. When I commented, she said the cats were at the door constantly because there were bats in the attic. I jokingly asked if it was haunted, and she laughed and said no, she didn't believe in ghosts anyway. A few nights into my stay, and I started having weird dreams and waking up to the sensation of not being alone. I started hearing noises from the attic. Not footsteps, but more like subtle bumping and dragging noises. I called my friend and she sent her dad over to investigate and said again that it was just bats. The noises creeped me out, so I asked my boyfriend to come stay with me. The first night, he woke me and said that he saw someone standing in the hall outside of the bedroom. Of course, no one was in the house and he thought maybe he was dreaming. The second night, we both heard the sounds coming from the attic. We decided to spend the rest of the night sleeping on the couches in the family room. It was then that I saw black orbs, like the ones you see in a picture when someone points out the orbs. I watched these translucent, blackish bubbles move around the room. I decided to cat sit during the day and not sleep there because the house was giving me the creeps big time. The second to last day, I went in the late afternoon after work to feed the cats and spend a little time with them. I had a long day and dropped off into sleep on the couch. When I woke up, it was dark outside, and I had that feeling of being disoriented, after when you have a nap. From my seat on the couch, I could see a picture that was on the wall of a short hallway connecting the front foyer to the kitchen. The picture glass reflected the kitchen. I looked at the picture and saw what looked like to be a man standing in the kitchen, motionless. His stillness was totally unnatural. I could see that even in a reflection. He was like a cutout of a person. His eyes were just two black holes. I had the misfortune of making eye contact with this thing that was in there. I knew instantly that it was looking at me. The second I made eye contact, I felt an overwhelming sensation of revulsion and absolute abject fear. I'm talking a primitive, nausea-inducing horror. My skin literally started crawling and my heart racing. I had to get out of there, and I mean immediately. The air felt electrified. The figure in the kitchen was no longer visible anymore, but it definitely was not gone. I felt certain that if it appeared to me again, I would never get over it. Thank God my purse and my shoes were with me. I just grabbed my stuff without putting my shoes on and bolted for the door. Turning my back on the kitchen to open the door was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I knew it was behind me. At this point, I was shaking. I leapt out the door and pulled it closed, but I still had to lock it. I fumbled and dropped the keys, and as I bent to pick them up, I became sure that that thing was standing right there, behind the big pane of beveled glass that made up the top half of the door. So I closed my eyes and locked the door with my eyes shut tight, and then I ran to my car and drove away as fast as I could without looking back at that house so I wouldn't see what was looking out at me. I called my friend's mom and told her I couldn't finish as I was sick, so asked no more questions. A few months later, my friend had a baby, and a month after that, my friend abruptly put the house up and moved out before it sold. This had been her and her husband's dream house. They sunk everything into it. It was her trophy. I couldn't believe it. I asked her what happened. She only said that they had to get out. Hey guys, this is Crimson Siren. I just wanted to thank you so much for listening to my videos and make sure you like and subscribe. If you want your story to be featured in a future video, just shoot me an email. I have that also down below in the description. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter for any future updates or just to know where I am at in my next video. I'm hoping to get one up about once a week. All artwork is accredited to Ari. I have a link down in the description below to his Tumblr. His commissions are open, so if you're wanting some art of your own, just send him a message. Again, guys, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful night.